20 was not available.
And you knew that from your work previous that day?
Yes.
Okay. And so then you, did you make an actual dispatch to 3:30 to respond to this call?
Yes.
And so when you do that, make that oral dispatch, you base it off this information that you're reading right here?
Correct.
All right. And prior to coming to court, did you have an opportunity to listen to a copy of that call?
Yes.
And we played that for you?
Yes.
That appeared to be an accurate recording of the actual call that you made?
Yes.
And we've marked that as Exhibit 10. And Your Honor, we would offer Exhibit 10 at this time.
2024, May 25, 2020.
3:30, because data is only available on your sector to Cup, Food, Don Chicago, 3759 Chicago. On 38th, they are reporting that there's a person who used a counterfeit bill as a business. Suspect is a black male, 6'4" taller.
Just so we're clear, that's not quite the end of the call, is it?
No.
All right. We will try again and see if we can get the whole thing to play. So in your call out then, you passed along essentially the same information as in the written part we saw in Exhibit 151.
Correct.
Slightly different based on just what you're reporting out, correct?
Correct.
All right, so Ms. Scurry, thank you for bearing with us and everybody, but we'll try Exhibit 10 again. And just before we play it, so the first thing that records is actually not your voice. That's just an electronic voice marking the time of the call, correct?
Correct.
All right, so we'll try Exhibit 10 again.
Chico 4, 23, May 25, 2020.
3:30. 3:30, because data is only available on your sector to Cup, Food, Don Chicago, 3759 Chicago. On 38th, they are reporting that there's a person who used a counterfeit bill as a business. Suspect is a black male, 6'4" taller, sitting on the hood of a blue Mercedes. License plate Floyd, Robert John 026, possibly intoxicated as well.
Club 320, could you put this call on pending priority 9 if we can get that forgery?
Copy, 30 option clear.
Copy, cancel, thanks, call.
So that is the total dispatch you had regarding this incident with the officers out on the street, correct?
Correct.
All right. So back up and run through this a little bit. And if you can tell us, Cup Foods is in which sector?
It's in Sector 320.
Okay. And you initially called this out to 3:30, correct?
Correct.
Do you recall who was working in 3:30 that day?
I don't specifically know.
And so when you start your shift, you just know there's a car out there that's 3:30, you're calling to them.
Correct.
And after that, 3:30 called back and said copy, correct?
Correct.
And what does that mean?
It means they acknowledge that they've been given a call.
And subsequent to that, there was a call from 3:20, correct?
Yes.
And what was the substance of that call?
They said they would take their call.
Okay. So, based on what you knew about 3:20 being busy, what did you take from that exchange that 3:20 was now calling in?
That they were able to at least put their call in pending and they could come back to it and then take their call.
They also mentioned pending priority 9. What does that mean?
That means that I didn't clear them from their call. Sometimes I will clear a squad for whichever reason, if it's report, advised, sent, there's a multitude of different reasons. And I instead just put it back in pending so they could pick it up later to finish whatever they needed to do.
And then 3:30 ended up calling and saying cancel, thanks 20, correct?
Correct.
All right, what did that mean?
That they were no longer going to be going to the call and to thank them.
And so when you're making, when you're doing that dispatch, at some point did you ask to send additional officers there?
In the initial one, no.
Correct. But did you eventually?
Yes.
All right. So if we can go back to 151, please. And again, we'll expand that first page so we can see it easier. You'll see a line at 201008. So that would be 81008, correct?
Correct.
And that's your identification number, correct?
Correct.
And so tell us what that line is about.
These are the actions that I did to back the squad 320 up with 330 and then 830.
And so when you're saying backed up 320 with 330, what does that mean? What do you...
Additional squads are en route.
And so did you request that, or was that information you got that they were going to back up 320?
I backed them up.
Okay. Do you recall why?
I believe, I don't remember specifically, that I heard something loud in the background and asked for additional squads until code 4.
And you did that as well with 830, correct?
Correct.
And what does 830 refer to?
Squad 830 is a park squad.
And by park squad, you mean what?
They're a Minneapolis park officer.
So it's the park police work for the city of Minneapolis as well.
Correct.
And so they can respond to calls in Minneapolis even though it's not in a park.
Correct.
And so then can you tell us a few lines down at 201102? Do you see that line?
Yes.
And describe for us what is listed there.
They are taking one out.
Okay. And what does that mean?
They are taking a person out of the vehicle.
Is that customary for officers to call that in?
Yes.
And right below that is a license plate number, correct?
Yes.
And we have removed the identifying information from that, correct?
Correct.
That's why there's a gap there.
Mm-hmm.
And though there is a street address in Minneapolis, correct?
Yes.
And that's on Ilion Avenue?
Correct.
Where is that in Minneapolis generally, do you know?
That is in the 4th precinct.
So which side of Minneapolis is that?
That is on the north side of Minneapolis.
And so this information has gone out to the officers as well, that address.
Correct.
And then following down to 201221, do you see that entry?
Yes.
And can you describe for the jurors what's depicted on that line?
It is squad 320 is code 4.
And so that means what to you?
CNC.
And incidentally, this 2012 is military time. That's 12, correct?
Correct.
I suspect you're far more accustomed to translating that than the rest of us.
Very much.
Yeah. And then the next line down, can you describe for the jurors what's there?
It says 8:30 is out with squad 320. That is when the squad arrived.
That is when the, what, I'm sorry?
The 8:30 park squad is now with squad 320 at that location.
Okay. And then if we move down to the next line, a whole bunch of stuff there. Not really concerned. That's just all coding for some information requested, I assume.
Yes, that is 8:30 put something in the call.
Okay. So then we'll move to the next page, and we'll expand this so we can see it. And actually, these 2 pages, we'll probably pull up both at the same time so we can look at them as we go along. Drawing your attention to the second line at 2020-11. Do you see that?
Yes.
And can you describe what's listed there, what that line is about?
I believe I heard EMS code 2 for a mouth injury requested by the squad.
And so that's 320 calling in for that, correct?
Correct.
And so code 2, you told us earlier, means what?
Non-emergent.
And then describe for us then what's depicted in the next line at 2021-35.
Squad 330 requested EMS code 3.
So this is now
Upgrade.
330 upgrading the call to code 3. Is that yes?
Yes.
And so they're asking for the ambulance to come quicker.
Correct.
And just to be clear, when we talk about EMS, we might think of that as an ambulance, right?
Correct.
All right. And then the next line at 2027-21, can you describe for the jurors what's depicted there?
It was information for the paramedics that police had the male restrained on the ground.
And incidentally, are you able to tell, who called that in, whether it was, or which squad it was?
I would be able to if I read the portable number,
Okay.
but I did not.
But not on this printout, correct?
Correct.
All right. So then the next line down at 2028-36. Do you see that?
Yes.
Can you describe for the jurors what that line has there?
So we first start out with a different number, so the long numbers with all the zeros, and then that is a paramedic writing into the call, and it says Rig 412 is requesting fire code 3, so we're adding additional agency to that.
Now explain why, is EMS different than fire?
Yes.
How so?
EMS, we have 2 different EMS companies we work with, North and then Hennepin County, Hennepin EMS. And this is them writing in here, adding the additional fire. Fire is clearly firefighters, but they are medically trained. They can be anywhere in the city close to within 4 minutes.
So this is the paramedics calling in
Additional support.
for support from the fire department.
Correct.
And then if we skip down 2 lines to 2031-12, tell us what's listed there.
Per engine or rig, this is the paramedic rig. 412 EMS is now located at Park and 36, so they no longer are on scene.
And so for those last 2 lines we've looked at, the EMS people are sending information to you, or to this call center.
Everything's shared.
Okay.
So we have a shared computer system that we use. And when you start adding additional agencies, everybody gets the same information so that everybody can be informed on what's going on.
And so this information then as well goes out to the fire department.
Correct.
Is that a separate thing you have to do, or is it automatic as part of the sharing?
It is an automatic thing once you are adding the agencies. So fire would not be able to see that unless they had their own call.
And so the line above that is the multi-agency fire is adding fire in?
Correct.
And so skipping down a couple lines now to 2033-02, can you describe for the jurors what's in that line?
It says via Metcom, EMS would like the fire department for patient condition at the requested location.
And this is something you dispatched out.
Correct.
And so that's, what's the import of this information? What's being communicated here?
I no longer knew what was going on. And I asked our partners, our agency, other agencies, via Metcom. It is a resource group that we have that we can connect radio to radio instead of phone to phone. It's faster. And I asked them what was going on, and that's what they told me, so I put it in the call so that everybody had that information.
And the next line down at 203410, can you describe where that information is coming from?
It's coming from the paramedics, and it says full arrest.
So that's something they're reporting into the shared system, full arrest.
Correct.
And the next line after that, 203430.
Again, coming from paramedics, or they said engine or rig 412, the paramedics are working a full arrest.
And the next line down, again, now is you calling in, or you handling this information, correct?
Yes.
And what are you dispatching out there?
Adding information that the fire department is en route to Park and 36.
And then the next line down, 203607.
That is a different ID number, and it starts with F, which means it's coming from one of our fire dispatchers. It says engine 17, fires 2 minutes out to 36 Then Park.
And the next line down, if you could just describe that for the jurors, the 204823.
That is EMS transporting to HCMC.
And then finally, this last line, 205506, in the column after the time, 330, correct?
Yes.
So what does that mean with that code being there?
The information that they provided.
Right, so is this 330 calling in?
They didn't call in. This is information they put directly into the call.
All right, how do they do that? What is
They
it?
have their computers. It's a laptop, I believe, in their cars that they're able to provide information that way too.
And so on this line, it references the status of the AP. Do you recognize the abbreviation AP?
No.
You don't know what that refers to?
No.
Okay. And so this is really a timeline of what happened during these calls, correct?
Correct.
So during this call, you know why we're here today, of course, because of this incident, correct?
Correct.
You have since learned the identities of the officers involved.
Correct.
On May 25th of 2020, did you personally know any of those officers?
No.
And during this time of this call, did you have some opportunities to look at the street video from this location?
I did.
And can you describe for the jurors how you came to see that?
While working at my position, we have 2 cameras or 2 TVs on our walls, one on both sides of the walls, so either side of the room can see. While I was dispatching calls, because this call was not the only call that I had to dispatch to officers in different precincts, I noticed that the cameras were up at 38th in Chicago and that we were able to see what was going on.
And did you recognize what was depicted in the video?
To the best of my knowledge.
And was Cup Foods in the video?
Yes.
And did you recognize that as Cup Foods?
Yes.
Was that consistent with what you knew to be 38th in Chicago?
Yes.
And so did you also, when you observed that, see some police officers?
Yes.
And can you just describe when you first looked up there in general kind of what you saw?
When I just saw the squad car. I didn't see the police officers.
And did you watch this video feed for a period of time?
I went in and out of the camera and being able to pay attention to it. I did not watch the whole video. or as it was happening, I did not watch the whole time.
And why not?
I still had calls to take care of and things to give out to the police officers.
So we've marked a copy of that video. Did you have a chance to view that before coming into court today?
Yes.
And you understand that we cropped it in the sense of on one side of the video there's a huge sign that kind of obscures that whole area. But the rest of the video does it fairly and accurately depict what you were able to see.
Correct.
So, Your Honor, we would offer what's been marked as Exhibit 11.
In objection, sidebar, Your Honor.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start showing Exhibit 11, and I'm going to let it run for about 15 seconds, and then I'm going to pause it, okay? All right, so if you could do that, please. All right, so I'm going to ask to pause it right here. Now, as I said, other than cutting out the big sign on the right side, does this fairly depict what you were able to see when you looked up at the screens on May 25th of 2020 regarding this incident?
Correct.
And you said when you first saw it, there were no officers. Now we obviously have seen some officers walking into view. Were you still able to watch it when they did walk into view?
I was in and out of this video, so I do not remember them walking to the car.
All right. And what do you remember seeing the next time that you looked up?
I believe they were getting into the back of the squad car.
And do you remember then the next time that you were able to see it, generally what was depicted?
I believe they were still trying to get into the back of the squad car. It was moving a little bit, and then I went back to my screens.
And I think what I'd like to do is have this run, and if you could just watch the video and tell the jurors, when you were able to look up and what parts that you remember seeing that day during your shift, okay?
Okay.
All right.
I believe this is close to where I started watching.
So obviously you can see some police officers here. Did you recognize them individually?
No. And then I know I didn't watch that much, and then the next time I looked, they were opening the door. I do remember that.
Which door do you mean?
The driver's side back seat. This is what I remember seeing.
And so for the record, we see the officers now trying to put Mr. Floyd into the back seat, correct?
Correct.
The timestamp on the top, for the record, reflects about 8:17 and 10 seconds when you said that, approximately.
Yes.
Now the officers have opened a rear passenger door. Do you remember seeing this part of the video?
Yes. I remember seeing the squad move.
And what do you mean by move?
So like now you can see the squad is moving back and forth.
It's not like being driven, but moving back and forth.
Right.
And for the record now, the timestamp at the top is 8:17:50 approximately.
And I know I wasn't able to watch all of this.
So at some point here, you had to turn away and do your job.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you remember what was the next thing you remember seeing?
The next time I remember looking up is they had moved from the back of the squad to the ground.
And so when you see that, let me know and we'll just make a reference to it at that time, okay?
Okay. I don't exactly know when they moved to the ground. I just know that when I looked up,
Right.
we were no longer in the back seat.
Because you told us that you remember seeing them on the ground with him, I want you to point out the time in the video that looks familiar to what you remember seeing when you say that you saw them on the ground with him, just so that we know, okay?
Okay. I believe this is when I started watching again.
So for the record, the timestamp at the top reflects 8:19:25. So this is what you mean by them having him on the ground.
Correct.
Do you recall how long you were able to watch around this time?
No, honestly, I was in and out of looking at the cameras and then going back to my screens to make sure I wasn't missing anything, added remarks, getting out calls, and then would go back to the screen again.
Now, and actually I think what I'll do is just pause it here. After seeing this, at some point, then did you look back to the screen?
To back to the working?
No, back to this video of the
Yes,
scene.
I was in and out of looking at this screen and then my work.
And at some point then, did you go back to this and how did it appear at that time when you went back to it?
It had not changed.
And what do you mean by that?
They were still on the ground. The whole situation was still the same.
Had there been other changes to the scene? Were there other people?
I didn't pay attention to the surroundings of what was going on. I just know that they hadn't moved.
Right. But at some point, did you see other citizens in the video?
I cannot remember seeing them. I just remembered looking up and seeing that the situation hadn't changed.
Do you recall approximately how long that was?
No. It was long enough. It was long enough that I could look back multiple times.
And so when you did look back, still on the ground, like depicted here, essentially.
Correct.
And what did you think about this when you looked back and saw that it hadn't changed?
I first asked if the screens had frozen.
Why did you ask that?
Because it hadn't changed.
Okay. And did you find that it had frozen?
No.
How did
I was told that it was not frozen.
Did you see the screen change yourself?
Yes, I saw the person's moving.
So what did you start thinking at that point?
Something might be wrong.
Why?
We don't get these videos often, or, video at all, unless it's looking at the bridge or just looking at people walking. We very rarely get incidents where police are actively on a scene. And they had changed. They had come from the back of the squad to the ground, and my instincts were telling me that something's wrong. Something is not right. I don't know what, but something wasn't right.
In what ways were you thinking that something was not right?
It was an extended period of time. Again, I can't tell you the exact amount of time. And they hadn't told me if they needed any more resources. It's a multitude of different things that ran through my brain. But I became concerned that something might be wrong.
Wrong with what? What are you thinking?
It was a gut instinct of, in the incident, something's not going right. Whether it be they needed more assistance, or if there just something wasn't right. I don't